When did my heart start to go cold? Probably the moment my son Nolan stopped meeting my eyes. Or maybe it was when my daughter-in-law Natalie looked at me with that impatient face. The kind of look you'd give an old piece of furniture taking up space. Or when my daughter Lainey sighed under her breath but never said a word. They said putting me in a nursing home was to let me enjoy my golden years. I looked up at the chipped sign, Suncrest Haven. The edges were rusted through and the letters leaned like they'd given up trying. I laughed, really laughed. What a blessing, huh? They don't get it. Fate has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. It waits until you're buried so deep in the muck you can't move. Then it flips the script. Just like that. My name is Sadie Lewis. I'm 68 years old. My husband passed away young, so I raised our 2 children, Nolan and Lainey, on my own. The long nights, the years of struggle. There's no point digging those memories back up now. I thought once they were settled I could finally exhale. Take a breath. Enjoy a few quiet years. What I didn't expect was for quiet to come so fast. So fast I didn't even have time to brace for it. That night we were all under one roof for a rare family dinner. I was still in the kitchen juggling dishes, when my daughter-in-law Natalie's voice cut sharply through the doorway. Sadie's health just gets worse every year. Nolan, I'm just being honest. What if she falls when we're not home? Are we supposed to leave work every time? Do you know how much medical care costs? Home nurses? We can't afford that. I heard Nolan mutter, Natalie, stop. Stop. Her voice rose. Am I saying anything that's not true? This house is going to be ours eventually. That other place she owns? It's old and out in the middle of nowhere. Worth next to nothing. If we move her into assisted living now it's $1,500 a month. Manageable. And she'll have nurses. It's safer than her being here alone. I was holding a pot of soup. My hand jerked. Boiling broth spilled across my skin. But the sting didn't come close to the burn in my chest. Then I heard Lainey. Natalie, maybe Mom doesn't want to go. Doesn't want to? Natalie let out a laugh like someone mocking a child too slow to catch on. She doesn't get a vote. We're doing what's best for her. Unless she's planning to move in with us full-time. Natalie. Nolan tried to interject but his voice trailed off into silence. Natalie pressed again. Nolan, Lainey, tell me I'm wrong. And the room went quiet. That was when I knew. They had all agreed. They just didn't have the guts to say it out loud. I wiped my hands on a towel and carried the dishes to the table one by one. I managed to force a smile. Come on, food's ready. It's getting cold. Natalie looked up at me like I was a coat left behind last season. Mom, she said, since you're here we wanted to talk to you about something. Nolan fidgeted, rubbing his palms together, eyes fixed on anything but me. We were thinking, maybe it's time to look at a care facility. It's decent. Meals are included. There's staff on hand. I cut him off. You mean a nursing home? He hesitated then nodded. Yeah. It's called Suncrest Haven. Not far from here. I've been. It's fine. Fine. I laughed but only in my head. Last month my neighbor Margaret was dumped in that same place by her son. She came back in tears, her face swollen from crying. That wasn't a nursing home. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. For beds crammed into a room. Not enough staff. Bathrooms you wouldn't wish on a stray dog. That was their idea of fine. I looked at the 3 of them. One looked slightly ashamed. One looked annoyed. And one was already calculating the savings. But not one of them. Not one. Looked at me with love. I paid for their homes. Raised their kids. Drained every penny of my savings for their comfort. Now that I was old and of no more use. I had become an inconvenience to be relocated. A problem to be handled. That's when my heart stopped aching. It started hardening. All right, I said softly. That answer, so calm, so simple, stunned them all into silence. Natalie was the first to react. Her face lit up like she'd just scratched a winning lottery ticket. Sadie, you really are so understanding, she gushed. I knew it, you've always put this family first. You get how hard this is for us. Nolan let out a breath, his voice softening. Mom, don't worry. We'll come visit. Often. Lainey kept her eyes down. She didn't say a word. I glanced at all of them, my voice steady. When? The sooner the better, Natalie answered quickly. I already checked. Suncrest Haven can take her next Monday. I nodded. All right. Monday it is. And right then I saw it. The relief. The ease that swept across their faces, like they'd just completed some difficult yet noble mission. They nodded to each other, exchanging light words, like they'd done the right thing and could now finally get a good night's sleep. None of them noticed how, in that moment, my head dipped ever so slightly. How the last flicker of softness behind my eyes went dark. What was left behind wasn't sadness. It was the start of something colder. You don't want me around. I'm old, inconvenient, disposable. You think dumping me in some rundown, low-cost senior home gets me out of your way for good? Fine. I'll go. But don't forget. I've lived a long life. I've survived worse. And if you think you're just sending off an old woman, you're about to find out you also sent away the last of your decency. This debt is recorded. The Monday morning arrived under a low, gray sky. It hung heavy and dull like it was grieving on my behalf. Even the clouds seemed to shed quiet tears for me. Nolan drove. Natalie sat in the front seat, looking exhausted but oddly light, like a weight had finally been lifted. Lainey was in the back with me, silent, though practically invisible. My suitcase was old, deep green, worn at the edges. Inside were a few changes of clothes and a black and white photo of my husband when he was young. I always kept it close. The car wound through smaller, narrower streets, until it stopped in front of a rusting iron gate. A crooked sign read, Suncrest Haven Senior Living. A few residents sat hunched on plastic benches outside. Their eyes were vacant. Their bodies leaned so far forward they looked one breeze away from collapsing. The air was thick with something foul. A mix of disinfectant, damp rot and old mildew. Natalie wrinkled her nose and pulled out a tissue to cover her mouth. Sadie, we're here, she said, barely trying to sound pleasant. Nolan got out and grabbed my suitcase. His hands moved like they were filled with sand, slow and reluctant. He never once looked at me. Well, go get the paperwork started, he mumbled. A woman in a stained white lab coat walked out to greet us. Her name tag read Director, Janet Moore. The coat had yellowed and bore old smudges of something I didn't want to identify. Her smile was wide and stiff like it had been pasted on too tight. Mrs. Lewis? So happy to have you. Your room is all ready, south-facing for beds, gets great sunlight. Natalie guided me inside, leaning close to whisper. See? They're so welcoming. It may not be home but it's quiet, it's got care staff, it's a good fit. I said nothing. Just walked. The sunny room had 4 metal-framed beds that creaked with the slightest shift. The walls were scuffed and peeling. The floor was cracked concrete, dust rising with every step. The window was grimy, coated in a brownish film that blocked any hint of warmth. 3 people were already in there. One lay unmoving. 2 others sat on the edge of their beds, staring blankly at nothing. The smell hit me immediately. A pungent cocktail of medicine, urine and stale air. Natalie rushed to the window and yanked it open like she needed air, like she needed to escape something. Sadie, take your time getting settled, she said without turning around. Nolan placed my old suitcase at the foot of the empty metal bed in the farthest corner. Mom, we've got some things to handle at work. We'll head out for now. We'll come visit soon. I heard the words. And I smiled, cold and silent just for myself. I looked them straight in the eyes. One by one. Nolan. Natalie. Lainey. Remember this day. I walked through that door on my own. From now on, good or bad, whatever happens, it's no longer your concern. Nolan's face went pale, his lips trembling. Mom, what are you saying? Natalie was quick to grab his arm, her voice dripping with artificially sweet calm. Don't listen to her. Sadie's just not used to it here yet. She'll be fine in a couple days. She flashed a smile at me, plastic and brittle. Rest up, Sadie. We'll be back in a few days. With that, she practically dragged Nolan out the door, never once looking back. Their hurried steps echoed down the hall. Not like they were leaving a loved one behind, but like they were getting rid of something messy. Something inconvenient. Lainey didn't move. She lingered in the doorway, her eyes red. Mom. I waved my hand, my tone flat. Go on, Lainey. Your brother and Natalie, they've got their own pressures. No need for you to feel torn. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't. She turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed, fading down the corridor. And then silence. I was alone. Alone with three other strangers who said nothing. The room was thick with stillness, like the air itself had turned heavy and stale. No voices. No breeze. Just the smell. A pungent mix of disinfectant, dampness, and something sour and old spinning endlessly in the air. I walked slowly to the empty bed and sat down. The metal frame let out a sharp, protesting creak. Part resistance, part resignation. That's when the tears came. Quiet and uninvited. Not from weakness. Not from shame. But from the weight of everything I had done. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of unconditional love poured into this family. And in the end, they left me in a place they couldn't even stand to breathe in for 5 minutes. Like discarding a piece of worn-out furniture. Suncrest Haven? What sun? All I saw were peeling walls, yellowed bulbs, and coldness that never let go. As I wiped my tears, the woman in the bed beside me stirred. She turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were cloudy, grayed by time. But inside them was something clear. Not kindness exactly. Not pity. Something more honest. Something that had already made peace with what this place was. Her voice was raspy but steady. New arrival? I nodded, quickly dabbing at my face. She let out a sigh. Don't cry. Everyone who ends up here carries a little grief. A little bitterness. But life, she paused. You get through it crying. Or you get through it not crying. Either way, you get through it. From the next bed, another woman chimed in, her voice cracked but still spirited. She's right, sweetheart. This place is rough, sure. But at least we've got people to talk to play cards with. Better than rotting alone in silence. I looked at them, faces carved deep with lines not just from age but from stories etched into skin like scars. And between those furrows, I saw something unexpected. A flicker of light. Not hope exactly, but something close. A stubborn thread tying them to life. Something in me stirred. A corner of my heart tapped back quietly. As life goes on. But not like this. Not buried in a room that stinks of urine and fading memories. Not waiting for scraps of affection from people who see you as a burden. I wasn't made for this kind of ending. I don't accept this fate. I slowly reached into the deepest corner of my coat pocket and felt the thin piece of paper tucked inside. A copy of the deed to my old house. It lay flat against my palm like a quiet reminder. I still had something of my own. A faint, cold smile crept across my lips. They thought that by settling me here everything was done? They were wrong. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Life at Suncrest Haven was even harder than I imagined. Every meal, calling it pig slop, would have been generous. Watery corn mush, rock-hard bread balls, and what they called vegetable soup. Nothing more than lukewarm water with a few floating leaves. The staff were few and far between. Most of them barely spoke, and when they did, it was in clipped, tired tones. If they managed to get your meds to you on time, you were lucky. As for asking how you were doing, forget it. Most of the people here were like me, talked into it by their kids or with nowhere else to go or just forgotten. The faces in the hallway wore the same look. Blank, brittle, hollow. I cried nearly every day the first week. Lying on that creaky metal bed at night, listening to my roommates coughing and the low moans of others shifting in pain. I hardly slept at all. And Nolan and Natalie? Just as I expected. They called once during the first week. The tone was polite. Mom, are you settling in okay? The food all right? But after that, nothing. Like I'd been snipped out of their lives. Clean and quiet. Only Lainey came by, twice secretly. Her eyes were red both times. She looked like a kid who knew she'd done something wrong. She'd leave a small plastic bag of snacks on my nightstand and push a few crumpled bills into my hand. Mom, I know this is unfair to you. Bro and Natalie, they're out of line. I'm saving up. Once I have enough, I'll get you out of here. I waved her off before she could finish. Your heart's in the right place. That's enough for me. Keep your money. You'll need it more than I do. As for your brother and Natalie, don't waste your breath. They're not worth it. I didn't want her caught in the middle. She had her own burdens. And if I'm honest, her late compassion didn't erase how cold her silence felt when I needed her voice the most. By now, the disappointment I felt wasn't aimed at one or two people. It was aimed at all of them. but I refused to stay buried in it. I wouldn't let it harden around me like cement. As the days passed, I tucked my tears away. In this place, despair is cheap. There's enough of it to go around. But I didn't want to drown my old age in it. I forced myself to eat no matter how tasteless the food. Forced myself to get out of bed, take walks in the courtyard. It wasn't much, just a few cracked pathways lined with overgrown shrubs. One loop took 3 minutes. But I walked it 3 times every day. I started talking to the others. I listened to stories of younger years. Of children who betrayed them. Of words that were never said when they should have been. My roommate, Blanche, had a son who ran a successful chain of restaurants. Married someone famous off TV. And yet, his wife said Blanche smelled old and didn't look good in their house. So they sent her here. He visits once a year. Just for show. And Mr. Hughes, who sleeps 2 beds down. He never married, never had kids. He lives off a barely their pension and the grace of strangers. Everyone here has their own sad chapter. Their own quiet storm. The more I listened, the quieter my heart became. Depending on others? That was a fool's game. You want your children to respect you? To love you? Only if they have the heart for it. And my son and daughter-in-law? Whatever conscience they had was long ago traded in for high-interest credit cards. That afternoon I was doing my usual slow walk around the yard, thoughts heavy but calm, when suddenly Natalie showed up. Dressed like she was headed to a reality show. Sickly sweet perfume clouding the air around her, clutching a flashy fruit basket like it was a photo prop. She said she came to visit. But everything about her screamed inspection. The moment she saw me, she plastered on a sugar-coated smile. "Sadie, how have you been feeling lately?" I looked her in the eye, my voice flat. "Still breathing, thanks to your generosity." Her face twitched. Just for a second. Then the smile snapped back into place. "Oh, come on," she said, stepping closer. "Nolan's been swamped at work, so I thought I'd stop by for both of us." She set the fruit basket down next to me. "Brought you a little something. Don't forget to eat, okay?" I glanced at the basket. 2 waxy apples on top. Beneath that, crumpled paper stuffing. Still the same old Natalie. All surface. No substance. "You didn't come here for this," I said, my tone cool and clipped. "Out with it." She rubbed her hands together and the mask slipped just enough to show the fox beneath. "Sadie, it's like this. You know that old house of yours? The one that's been sitting empty? Well, we were thinking, it's a bit of a waste just leaving it there. So maybe, you could hand over the deed? We'd fix it up a little, nothing major. Then rent it out. And the rent money? We'd send it to you. You could use it for better meals, maybe some extras." He made it sound so thoughtful. Better meals, huh? More like helping pay down their credit cards. I smiled, soft, vacant, almost innocent. "The deed." I blinked. "What deed?" I've got such a bad memory these days. Can't quite recall where I put it. Her face darkened. "Mom, you can't forget something like that. That's the property deed. It's important." She stepped in, voice rising, eyes flashing with just a hint too much desperation. "You must have put it in a drawer or something. Why don't we stop by and look for it together?" She tried to sound helpful, but her eyes already had the gleam of someone planning how to pry open the cabinets. I felt a slow, cold laugh creep through my chest. "You think I'd let you go rummaging through my home while I'm locked away here? Dream on." "No need," I said as casually as if we were talking about the weather. "I've made other plans for that house." Her whole body tensed. "What plans?" I saw it, panic bubbling just beneath her polished surface. I let it linger, then smiled. "I'm selling it." "What?" She nearly jumped out of her skin. "You can't sell it." Her voice cracked into a screech. "That house." She fumbled, words falling apart in her mouth. "That house what?" I asked, voice smooth as ever. "It's mine. My name's still on the deed. I'm not dead yet. And here you are, already planning your inheritance." Natalie's mouth hung open. She had no comeback. Nothing to say. She clearly hadn't adjusted to the new version of me. The woman who no longer played along. "Sadie, you're misunderstanding," she said, switching to a softer tone and flashing a saccharine smile. "We're only thinking of your best interest. You're here all alone. What if something happens and you don't have cash on hand? Give us the house, let us manage it for you. That way, if you're ever in a bind, you'll have a safety net." It sounded lovely. But I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't giving me a lifeline. She was trying to block every single one of mine. I'll manage my own safety net, thanks, I said flatly, rising to my feet. I'm going back to my room. I'm tired. I didn't so much as glance at the fruit basket. Take it with you. I'm not short on apples. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her fake smile and clenched fists. She stomped her foot like a tantrum-prone child, muttering under her breath. But I didn't bother turning around. I walked lighter than I had in weeks. Seeing her flustered, watching her stew in that entitled rage. It was delicious. Natalie, you really thought I was still that soft, pliable woman who'd sit back quietly whenever you said, "Mom, just relax, we've got this"? Please. This house. It's my last weapon. And I'm not playing that card until I'm ready. I'm waiting. For the perfect moment. And when it comes, you, Nolan, will pay for your greed and selfishness. With something far more valuable than property. After that tense little visit, Natalie disappeared for a while. Quiet days. But I knew her. She wouldn't stay still long. She and Nolan had already carved that old house into their future like it was a guaranteed inheritance. No way they'd walk away without a fight. Life went on. Suncrest Haven was still cold. The food was still inedible. But I stopped minding it so much. I filled my days with Blanche, Gerald, and the others, talking playing chess sitting in the sunlight. Still, one string inside me stayed taut. As I was waiting for one message. A game changer. About a month later, a man in a tailored suit walked through the front gate of Suncrest Haven. Not the type to be visiting relatives. Hair combed back, shoes polished, a briefcase in hand. He asked for me by name. Director Janet led him straight to my room and knocked politely. "You must be Mrs. Sadie Lewis?" he said with a practiced smile. "I'm Jonathan Parks, Director of Municipal Redevelopment for the City of Pittsburgh." My heart dropped. Then leapt. It was happening. Finally. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yes, Mr. Parks. What brings you here?" He gave a polite nod. "It's about the property you own on Rosewood Avenue. That neighborhood's been approved for inclusion in the city's urban renewal project. We'll be moving forward with demolition and redevelopment shortly. I'm here today to begin preliminary discussions on compensation." Compensation. The word rang in my ears like a firecracker, lighting up the whole room in a single blast. All these years, I'd waited for this. Carefully, quietly. I pressed down the wild pounding in my chest, but my voice still shook a little. "How much are we talking?" He pulled a folder from his case, opened to a marked page and slid it toward me. "Based on the property's square footage, location, structural condition, and our current incentive program for early agreement." Then he said the number. I thought I'd misheard. It was nearly double what I expected. So much that I could spend the rest of my life sunbathing on the southern coast of France. And still not run out. My fingers clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I was shaking just a little, but I bit down hard and didn't lose control. Jonathan must have noticed the tremor in me because his tone softened. "Mrs. Lewis, no need to rush," he said gently. "This is just the preliminary offer. We'll go through several rounds before finalizing. But the general range shouldn't change too much. If you have any additional concerns or requests, we're open to adjustments." I inhaled slowly, forcing calm into my voice. "Thank you for coming in person. It's just a lot to take in. I'll need some time to think about it." "Of course." He handed me a business card. "My direct line's on there. Call me anytime." After he left, I closed the door behind him, and the moment my hand touched the wood, my composure cracked. I sat down on the edge of the bed, cradling the document in my hands, reading that number over and over. The tears came fast. Not from pain. From release. From disbelief. From joy so sharp it felt like light cracking through years of darkness. This was it. This was mine. I, Sadie Lewis, who had suffered, swallowed her pride, and kept her head down her whole life, was finally standing in the sunlight. This money belonged to me. Not Nolan. Not Natalie. Not even Lainey. They had thrown me out like a used-up handbag. Tossed me into this place like I was taking up space. No. Now they would not see a single cent of it. I was going to live. Really live. In a way they wouldn't even dare to imagine. In a way that would burn their eyes to look at. I was going to show them. I was not some weak, disposable old woman to be exiled to a nursing home like unwanted baggage. I was going to make them regret it. That thought took root in me, fast and wild, like vines growing through cracks in stone. It burned inside my chest, hot and electric. But I told myself, breathe, Sadie. Keep calm. This offer, this windfall. It was still just a piece of paper. The real power was me holding it, and I needed to hold it tight. More importantly, Nolan and Natalie could not find out. Not yet. Not now. I carefully slid the offer letter and Jonathan's business card under the bed frame, wedged them deep beneath the slats. From that day on, I returned to being the quiet old woman at Suncrest Haven, the one everyone assumed time had forgotten. But inside me a storm had begun to churn. I was planning something. And if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's this. Bad news runs faster than the mailman. But good fortune? That kind of secret can only stay hidden for so long. Especially with someone like Natalie. Sharp as a hawk and twice as nosy. I don't know where the leak came from, but it didn't take long before I saw the change. Suddenly Nolan and Natalie were showing up all the time. Every few days. Bringing little nothings. A bunch of bananas, some clearance bin coffee beans. A bottle of vitamins with a 50% off sticker still on it. They asked about my health. They smiled too hard. Said sweet things they'd never bothered to say before. And Natalie? She laid it on thick. Sadie, you look radiant lately. I knew this place would be good for you. It's such a relief knowing you're somewhere safe and cared for. I gave her a blank face but rolled my eyes inside. Relief? You're not relieved I'm cared for. You're relieved because you found out the land your mother-in-law owns is about to print money. I glanced sideways at her and replied coolly. Is that so? I suppose this place is tolerable. Not quite what I'd call comfortable. Certainly doesn't feel like home. Her eyes flickered just a beat too long. But she recovered fast. Well, Sadie, if you're really not happy here, maybe soon we could bring you back to live with us. Bring me back? I almost laughed in her face. I looked at her squarely. Oh, your little house has space for me now. Natalie's face froze. The smile still clung to her lips, but it was stiff. Plastic flowers had more life. Sadie, you're such a joker, she said with a brittle laugh. But actually, we were just wondering. She leaned in slightly. We heard your old house might be getting torn down soon. There was the fox's tail finally showing. I put on my best wide-eyed expression. Demolished? That's news to me. Who said that? Nolan jumped in quickly. Mom, it's all over town. They're saying that whole neighborhood's getting redeveloped. The payouts aren't small either. Come on, you don't have to keep it from us. I sighed, slow and deliberate, then gave them the face of someone reluctantly letting go of a secret. There's been some talk, I said vaguely. Someone from the city office did come by, but it was all very unclear. Nothing definite. No dates. No figures. Half true, half not. Just enough to stir their hunger and keep them guessing. Natalie sat up straighter, tension tightening her shoulders. Sadie, this is serious, she said, eyes gleaming. You need to be on top of this kind of thing. These big projects, you need someone younger to help navigate it. Just hand over the deed. We'll talk to whoever's in charge, what was his name, and negotiate for the best deal. Oh, she said it like it was a favor. Like they were doing me some grand charitable service. But I knew better. Natalie could run circles around a real estate agent when it came to calculating personal gain. No need, I said calmly. The deed's safe. The house is under my name. I'll handle everything myself. As for Mr. Parks, I'm already in touch. You two have enough on your plates. Focus on that. Nolan tensed. Mom, this stuff's complicated. What if someone tricks you into signing the wrong thing? You could lose everything. We're your family. You think we'd ever hurt you? I looked at him. Cold and even. Hurt me. Every single thing you've done has been a cut. Calculated wound. You didn't throw fists. You made your choices. And each one chipped away at me like I was nothing. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. I said no. This is my house. My business. I'll make the calls. If you truly care, stop digging. Let me be. Let me have some peace here. Is that so much to ask? Natalie's face went pale, her breath quickened. She hadn't expected this version of me. The one who didn't flinch at her sweet words or flattery. Her jaw clenched. She opened her mouth, ready to argue. But Nolan tugged at her sleeve, cutting her off with a look. "That's enough," he muttered. He turned to me. "All right, Mom. If that's what you want, we'll back off. Just be careful, okay? If anything comes up, call us." They left, him leading, her following close behind. Neither looked pleased. Both wore that look of unfinished business. I watched their backs as they disappeared down the hallway, and I knew this wasn't over. Next time they'd come back with a different plan. New words, new tricks. They weren't done circling, which meant I needed to move. Fast. I needed to get ahead. Start putting my plan into motion. Right then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "Hello. Hi, is this Sadie Lewis?" The voice was gentle, professional. "This is Mike from Liberty Horizon Travel. I'm a client manager. A few days ago you submitted an inquiry on our website. Something about chartering a private plane for a group trip to Europe?" My chest tightened. It's happening. This was the move I'd been waiting for. The strike that would change everything. I rushed to the window, quickly scanning the hallway. The door was shut. No footsteps. No shadows. Only then did I lower my voice and speak into the phone. "Yes, that was me who submitted the form. Mike, I need to ask. If I wanted to charter an entire plane to take every resident of this nursing home on a trip abroad, what kind of budget are we talking? And would the paperwork be complicated?" My voice was barely above a whisper. But I couldn't stop the faint tremble at the end of the question. On the other end there was a pause. Then Mike adjusted his tone, now more formal, more attentive. "Mrs. Lewis, that's an extraordinary idea." She paused, then added with a warm chuckle. "I've never had a client with your level of vision and generosity. The cost depends on a few factors. Number of passengers, destination, duration, aircraft type, lodging preferences. But we specialize in luxury group travel, and we can absolutely design a fully personalized package for you. As for logistics, yes, there will be details to work through. Health assessments for the elderly guests, visas, group insurance, special accommodations, medical supervision. But don't worry. We'll walk you through every step." My heart was thundering. Charter a plane. To Europe. For every single resident at Suncrest Haven. The idea had been swirling in my head for weeks. A mad, impossible dream I hadn't dared speak aloud. But the moment the words left my lips, it stopped being a fantasy. It became a bullet, fired fast, irreversible. I opened my mouth to ask about timelines, when suddenly, bang, the door slammed open so hard it rattled on its hinges. I jumped. My phone nearly flew from my hand. And there she was. Natalie. Face contorted in fury. Breathing hard. Eyes blazing. In her hand was what looked like my room key card. She was panting, shrill, furious, screaming like a cornered animal. "I knew you were hiding something. I heard everything at the door. Chartering a plane? A European vacation? Have you lost your mind? The demolition money's already come in, hasn't it? Where is it? You think you can keep it all to yourself?" She looked feral, like a lioness backed into a corner, all claws and rage, and absolutely no shame. I stumbled back a step, heart hammering, the phone still clenched in my hand. She eavesdropped. She stole my key card. She broke into my room. My fury surged, but I forced myself to stand tall. I couldn't panic. I wouldn't panic. My voice was ice. "Are you finished?" Natalie froze, caught off guard. She clearly expected a meltdown. Not this. I walked to the nightstand, set my phone inside the drawer, and slowly closed it. Then I turned to her. "You were listening outside my door?" She lifted her chin, unapologetic. "You were sneaking around, making secret calls." "Of course I listened. Don't act like you didn't want to hide this from us. Mom, you can't handle this kind of thing alone. The house, the payout, the contracts. What if you mess something up and lose everything? We're your family. We deserve to know." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Now you remember I'm family? When I was old, inconvenient in your way, you didn't seem so concerned." She flinched. Just a flicker. But then she dropped her tone, painting on that syrupy voice again. "Sadie, we were just overwhelmed. We said some things we didn't mean. You can't hold that against us. Don't think the worst of us. This compensation is a big deal, Sadie. You can't handle it all alone. If you trust me, give me the deed and that paperwork. I'll find a lawyer. We can take care of this together. I looked up at her, fully, as if I were studying the face of a stranger. Then I said quietly, "Do you really think I'd hand over the last thing I own?" Natalie's expression twisted in an instant. "Sadie, you're being unreasonable." "I am being reasonable," I cut her off, my tone calm but firm. "Just not the kind of reasonable you and Nolan like to hear." She stood there, trembling, her hands clenching the fruit basket like she wanted to snap the handle off. I sat down again, slipped Mike's business card back into the pages of my book like a bookmark and said, "Stop circling my house like vultures. I've lived 68 years and I didn't survive them all just to give my life away to greed." Natalie's jaw locked, her lips white from tension. Then she snapped. "You don't think we can go to court? We can file for financial guardianship." "You're old, Sadie. You're not thinking straight anymore. The court won't just sit back and let you blow through that money." That did it. A flame roared to life in my gut. Not fear. Fury. I stood up slowly, leaned in and said quietly, "Try me. You're not the only one who knows how to hire a lawyer." She froze. It was the first time she truly looked at me. Not as a frail old woman, but as someone who had just shown her teeth. "Now get out." I pointed toward the door. She hesitated, but the pressure in the room drove her backward. Just before stepping out, she turned with a glare that could have shattered glass. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Just closed the door and clicked the lock into place. Silence. I leaned against the door, exhaled. My hands trembled, but my eyes were sharper than ever. Natalie's little outburst had thrown off my timeline. Worse, it had exposed my hand. I didn't have the luxury of waiting anymore. It was time to strike. Because Natalie wasn't the only one who knew how to act. I opened my phone and sent Mike a follow-up email, reconfirming everything we discussed point by point. I wanted it all in writing. Then I made another call. To Lainey. It was time she knew everything. He answered quickly. I could hear chatter in the background. A checkout line, maybe. "Mom? It's late. Is something wrong?" I didn't reply right away. I just listened to her voice. "I want to take you to dinner," I said at last. "Not here. Not your place either. Can you book somewhere quiet? With a private booth?" There was a pause. Then her voice came back, softer. "I know a little Italian spot not far from you. I'll pick you up." The next afternoon she showed up right on time. As always, she looked polished, composed. But something about her posture was different today, less guarded. We sat by the window, ordered our food. And finally she asked, her voice low, serious, "Are you serious about this? You know what they're trying to do, don't you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a set of documents. A copy of the property valuation report, the preliminary compensation agreement, Jonathan Park's business card, and a draft plan for a trust fund. I laid them out between us and looked her in the eye. She froze. You already set all this up?" I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I let out a quiet sigh. "Do you remember what you said the first time they brought up sending me to a nursing home?" She dropped her gaze, her fingers instinctively twisting the napkin in her lap. I didn't say anything. "Exactly," I said. "I was disappointed then. But now I get it. It's not that you didn't care. You were just still stuck in that phase of life where you worry too much about what everyone else thinks." She looked up, her eyes rimmed red. "Mom, it wasn't that I didn't want to help you. I was just scared that standing up for you would mean burning every bridge with them." "And now?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and handed me a folder. "I made an appointment with a trust attorney," she said quietly. "I already had a consult. You have every legal right to place the compensation into an irrevocable trust. You can designate the beneficiary. Even if it's that one-eyed cat from the nursing home, they can't touch it." I blinked, then laughed out loud. "You really are my daughter." He gave a soft chuckle. "Late bloomer, but still in season." We took our time with the meal. She asked about everything. The travel agency, the itinerary, the list of residents. "You're serious about chartering the flight?" "For all of them." "I am." "Where to?" "The Maldives." Lainey's eyebrows shot up. "I thought it was Europe?" "I changed my mind," I said. "I want to take them somewhere no one rushes them, no one stares at their wrinkles like their decay." Just sun, sea, and silence. She stared at me and her gaze softened. Will you come back? I smiled. Of course. But not to visit them. I'll come back so they can see it with their own eyes. That I lived just fine without them. That night back at Suncrest Haven I moved fast. First I emailed Mike and updated the destination to the Maldives. I requested a medical support-capable charter crew with senior care expertise. Second, I scheduled the trust attorney to meet me at the facility the next day. All paperwork would be signed on site. I also issued a formal legal declaration stating I had authorized the attorney to manage all assets and enforce my personal directives, explicitly barring interference from any family member. Third, I called Jonathan Parks. I asked him to accelerate the final agreement and ensure that all negotiations were presented to me directly, with no proxies, no third-party signatures. His response was swift and firm. Mrs. Lewis, you're the legal owner. Of course we'll honor that. I placed every document, receipt, and confirmation into a folder, slid it into the lockbox under my bed, and shut the lid. My hands didn't shake this time. I was ready. Natalie and Nolan didn't know it yet, but they had already missed their last chance to change the outcome. A week later, the payment came through. That morning, I sat on the edge of my bed reading the bank confirmation 3 times over, just to make sure the number wasn't a mirage. I didn't tell a soul. Not yet. But the inevitable knock came. At 3 p.m., Natalie and Nolan strolled into Suncrest Haven, faces painted with that same tired smile of concern that only touched their skin, not their eyes. Mom, have you given more thought to the compensation? Nolan asked as he rubbed his hands together like he was warming them up for the big pitch. Natalie stepped into my room, scanning everything. The desk, the drawers, the cabinets. Her gaze flicking and calculating. I shut the door behind them and returned to my seat by the bed. No need to play coy, I said. You came for answers, so let's cut to it. I signed the agreement. And the money? It's in. A flicker of excitement flashed across Nolan's face. So, how are you planning to handle the money? He asked quickly. Do you want us to help manage it? We could look into some low-risk investments, maybe talk to a financial planner. I looked at the two of them, as if I were watching a pair of jackals preparing to tear into fresh meat. I didn't respond to his question. Instead, I slid the trust documents across the table toward them. This trust, I said, was set up with my attorney. All of the compensation has been transferred into an irrevocable account. The trustee is my lawyer. Without my written consent, no one, not even family, can touch a cent of it. Natalie's face dropped as if I had slapped her. She stood frozen, mouth half open, completely speechless. Nolan managed a weak smile. Well, come on. We're your family. We're not strangers. No, I said, holding his gaze. You're not strangers. You're my family. But family has boundaries. And the moment you signed me away to this place, you were the ones who shattered them. Natalie finally found her voice, and when she did, it was shrill with fury. You had no right to cut us out like this. We have the legal grounds to apply for financial guardianship. You're a senior citizen, Sadie, and the court won't just stand by while you blow through that kind of money. I said nothing. Instead, I opened my drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. This, I said, is a recording of the last time you broke into my room, eavesdropped on my call, and verbally threatened me. I've backed it up. My lawyer has a copy on file. Natalie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She couldn't form a single word. Nolan's shoulders slumped, his face a storm of shame and simmering resentment. Mom, he said quietly, so this is it? You're cutting us off. No, I said, my tone calm and clear. You did that yourselves. Long ago. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain open. Sunlight poured into the room, spilling across the trust documents on the table like a spotlight. In 1 month, I said, I'll be leaving this place. Natalie blinked. Leaving? Where are you going? I turned back and smiled. The Maldives. I chartered a private jet. I'm taking every resident from Suncrest Haven who wants to go. We'll sip fruit juice by the ocean, watch mermaid shows, and soak up the sun like we're 20 again. We don't need pity. We don't need caretakers deciding what our lives are worth. We just want, just once, to live like people again. Lainey had appeared in the doorway, quietly listening. Her eyes glistened, Part awe, part apology. Natalie lost control. You're insane. You're wasting money on a bunch of wrinkled old. Stop talking. Lainey's voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a gavel in a courtroom. The room went silent. She walked forward and placed her hand gently on my shoulder. Mom, she said softly, I'll take you to the airport. Nolan opened his mouth, but no words came. He simply lowered his head, took Natalie's arm, and walked out with her in stunned, bitter silence. I closed the door behind them. The quiet returned, but this time it was comforting. I turned to Lainey. You're really not angry with me? I asked. She shook her head. I don't regret what you're doing now. I only regret not speaking up the first time they tried to put you away. I smiled. My eyes were wet, but they didn't sting anymore. A month later, the sun over the Maldives was fierce and golden. But before that day came, I spent every hour turning a wild dream into something real. I finalized every detail with the travel agency. The aircraft model, the medical team, the ground transportation. Everything tailored to be senior-friendly. Every day I sat with the residents of Suncrest Haven, leading little meetings, walking them through the itinerary, helping them get their checkups, fill out visa forms, take passport photos. We weren't just preparing for a trip. We were preparing for a reclamation. Of time. Of dignity. Of joy. Some were hesitant at first. My legs aren't what they used to be. I'm too old, I'll just slow everyone down. I've never even left the state, let alone gone that far. Each time I took their hands in mine. And I said, you're worth it. We all are. In the end, 15 residents signed up. Every single one of us passed the health screenings. Not a single person backed out. Even the Suncrest Haven staff, who had once looked on with skepticism, began helping us pack, print medical documents, and even walked us through mock boarding drills. The nursing home had never been so alive. Jonathan Parks visited in the final days. He handed me a thank you letter signed by the mayor himself. Told me the city would be featuring our story in a community spotlight campaign. I looked him in the eye and said, don't make me a poster. I didn't do this for attention. I did this to feel like a human being one last time. On the morning of departure, Lainey pulled up in her car, helping me and 2 residents in wheelchairs arrive first at the airport. We gathered at the gate. Blanche wore a floral dress, wide-brimmed straw hat and a touch of rouge, like she was headed to a pageant. Gerald brought high-powered binoculars. Said he planned to count the waves at sunset in the Maldives. Their laughter sounded like children at recess. When I stepped up the boarding stairs, standing before the aircraft painted with the custom banner, Gracelight Senior's Journey, I didn't look back. Not once. Inside the cabin I sat by the window. In my lap was a travel booklet, and as the plane taxied down the runway I closed my eyes. Outside, Pittsburgh shrank in the distance. That city had held every ounce of my obligations, sacrifice, and the quiet erasure of being just a mom. But now, I was finally leaving it. Not to escape. To be reborn. Later, Lainey told me Nolan and Natalie had tried filing for an emergency financial review with the court after I left. But my lawyer had already submitted a full financial disclosure and health competency report before takeoff. Every exit was sealed. They didn't even know what country I was in. But me. I was sitting under the sun in the Maldives. A warm breeze teasing through my hair. I wore a light, long-sleeve wrap. Sipped fresh coconut juice. Surrounded by sisters snoring softly on lounge chairs. And a volunteer flying a drone to document the trip. I pulled out an old photo from my wallet. The one of me and my husband, young and laughing, standing on wooden steps. I held it to my chest and whispered, "See? I made it." On the 3rd day I got a voice message from Lainey. "Mom, your travel video is all over the internet. People are calling you a role model for senior women. I've started helping Gracelight do local outreach. We're already planning the next round. Oh, and that sun hat of yours? Looks amazing." I laughed. For once, not as someone's mother or someone's burden, but simply as myself. I am Sadie Lewis. A woman who lived all the way to the end. For herself.